Hello. My voice is audible, right?
Yes, audible, sir.
A very good afternoon to all the participants. First of all, I am grateful to all these three branches to coming together and arranging such a wonderful session, not just for their members but also for the students. This is one of its kind program wherein the Vikasa team gets together and perform certain organization seminars which helps to their day-to-day affairs in their articleship. It is very much important to look after the integrities of law, because after all, after completion of 3 years of articleship, you are going to end up with some legal provisions as well. It is not just that visiting client's place doing the audit for the sake of doing it, but it is equally important to also look after the provisions of law. Why are we doing so? I remember in my articleship days, I used to do service tax, stock audit, internal audit. So one of the question that raised in my mind, that why I am doing so and how it is to be done. Is there any governing compliance or an act or any provision which is asking the taxpayers to go through such internal controls or auditing? So when I was doing my service tax calculations and filing of return, so I refer to the legal governing section, that how the taxpayer is supposed to file the returns, which provision is making them comply enough to file the returns. So these are very small important things that after you complete your articleship and you end up being a chartered accountant, the groups that you come across may ask you that why are we filing it? Is there any governing section which is helping out to be filed? Then answer is yes. So merely doing 9 to 5 articleship will not turn out to be a good articleship in my view, because when I was doing my articleship, I had a focus that these are the only 3 years where I can learn something out of it, and I have to implement this learning of 3 years in my coming 50 years or 40 years of practice. So with this mindset, I would start my session. I'll just share the screen. I think I'm unable to share the screen. The host disables participant screen sharing. Now, Iral bhai, if you can help out with this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now it's helping out. So hope the PPT is visible enough. Is the PPT visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the topic that I've been allotted to look after is such that these are the basic ingredients to form a cooking or a dish or any recipe. The same way, these are the important ingredients of the GST law. If you are go through such particular ingredients, I would say 50% of the law is done for me, because it helps you to grasp the situation in a very good way. So we'll discuss the basic structure first of all, then the scope of supply, which is very much important, levy and collection. So this provision addresses that how the government has empowered themselves to charge GST and collect it from the registered person. Composite supplies and mixed supplies, time of supply, very important, nature of supply. Once you are known to a fact that GST is applicable, then what type of or what kind of GST I'm supposed to pay. So nature of supply helps you out to determine whether I'm supposed to pay IGST or CGST or SGST. Then place of supply. So the place of supply plays a very important role to determine whether it is an interstate transaction or an intrastate transaction. So in between, I may ask some questions to the participation. I'll really appreciate if they put their answers in the check box, so that I come to know that how active the participants are right now. So coming to the basic structure, before we get into GST, we need to understand that what all indirect tax laws were applicable before GST came into picture. So the three main indirect tax law, which were excise duty, central sales tax and value added tax, and Finance Act, which was covering service tax law. So we need to understand at what point in time does the indirect tax gets triggered. In excise, if you do manufacturing of goods, excise duty becomes leviable. It is attracted to excise duty. But the payment used to happen when the goods are removed outside the factory. So the taxing event was manufacturing, but the collection part used to happen when the goods are moved outside the factory. As far as VAT is concerned, if you do any sale of goods, VAT or central sales tax would be leviable. VAT was for the confined to the state itself, and central sales tax was addressing the interstate transaction between the state which used to happen. If we talk about service tax is applicable only when you render any sort of services. For example, chartered accountancy service. I provide a consultancy service to my client. So these services are getting covered under the service tax law, and I am supposed to pay the service tax. Now, these three laws have been mixed up. You can say they have been refined well and come out with a law which is called a goods and services tax. The name itself says that this law is taxing goods and services. Very important, very crucial, the word supply. This word supply is crucial enough to understand that this GST law or the tax which is going to be charged will only apply or will only exist if any transaction is falling under the phrase or the word supply. Now I have just given a short summary that what kind of type of taxes are going to be charged. If it is an interstate supply, it would be always CGST and SGST. Interstate, it would be IGST. On imports, there are two sort of taxes which are going to be triggered under indirect tax law. One is custom duty. Custom duty is still prevailing. The Custom Act is still prevailing. In the IGST, earlier, before GST law came into picture, when you do import, you are supposed to pay custom duty at the time of filing bill of entry. Along with it, they were also charging countervailing duty, which is equivalent to the excise, and special additional duty, which was equivalent to VAT. Now, countervailing duty and special additional duty has been replaced by IGST. So at the time of import, we are going to pay the customs, and then instead of CVD and SAD, we'll be discharging IGST, and the imports are considered as interstate transaction under the law. We'll discuss with the coming slides. We talked about imports. What about exports? Exports are zero rated supply. Zero rated supply consists of two things. One is exports and one is supply to SEZ unit or a developer. Though these transactions are interstate supply, but under section 16 of the IGST Act, they have provided two options. Whether you want to do it under letter of undertaking by not charging GST, or you can charge the GST and claim the refund accordingly. But in the recent finance budget, they have proposed to amend this section, and they only want that under LUT option should be only prevail, and for the with payment of IGST exports or SEZ supplies, they'll notify the class of person. But the finance budget proposals are not been notified yet as far as GST is concerned. Now let me talk about the crucial part of the law, or the way blood moves in our body to help us living. The same way supply is also a very important part to run GST law. If there is no supply, you don't get into GST law at all. So before we get into the proper section, we need to understand what are goods and what are services under the law which has been defined. Goods means every kind of movable property. Every kind of movable property could be pen, it could be a mobile phone, it could be a printer, it could be a laptop, it could be a machinery. These all kind of movable properties other than money and securities, but includes actionable claims. So any claims toward debt, insurance, batting, gambling, growing crops, grass, and things attached to or forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. So this long phrase, in brief, I would say the grass that grows on the land is also an immovable property. But if you take out the grass, then it happens to be a movable property. So that is what they wanted to cover in the definition of goods. So anything which can be moved is a goods, except money and securities. Securities means derivatives, equity, FNO. Now coming to service. Service means anything other than goods. So they have given a very wide definition of service. So whatever you imagine that this could be other than goods will part the form of services. So anything which is not goods is a service. Means anything other than goods, money, and securities, but includes activity relating to the use of money or its conversion by cash or by any other mode from one form, currency or denomination to another, currency or denomination for which separate consideration is charged. So they, in brief, I would say these are the foreign exchange transaction. If in case you want to visit any other country and you want foreign exchange, so you drop down to a place where you can exchange your rupees into US dollar or Singapore dollar or any other currencies. So such conversion activity will form part of service, though the money itself is not a service or neither it is a goods, but they'll charge extra amount that I have facilitated you to convert your money. You give me you give me INR, I'll give you dollars. So such conversion of money, they charge an extra amount. So such charging of an extra amount will be a part of service. Now one may also have a question that the securities are outside the ambit of GST. So what about the broker? So the brokers help you to get the script or the equity. So for which they charge a brokerage. But one may also ask that brokerage is charged in terms of purchase and sale of securities. Though the broker is not purchasing or selling securities per se, but he is helping out the customers to purchase and sell the securities. So the broker will charge a brokerage because the broker is giving you a platform to transact. So such brokerage or such services provided by the broker will get under the ambit of GST. So this was a query which was cleared out by the GST Council by inserting an explanation. For the removal of doubt, it is hereby clarified that the expression service includes felicitation or arranging transaction in securities. So more or less, what are goods, what are services, you are able to figure it out. A crucial one. Section 7, the governing section of GST law. Section 7, subsection 1 says, supply includes. So here the word includes is defining that this is an inclusive definition. So they have only drafted the situation that they think of, but there may be certain transaction which may not be representing these words, may also come into the picture of GST. 7.1a says all forms of supply. So whatever you can think of can get into supply, but it should be of goods or services, such as sale. Now, what do we mean by sale? You drop down to a provisional store or a storekeeper, you buy some cosmetic product. Over a counter, he'll be selling it to you. In return, you'll be paying it the consideration. So here the title is getting shifted from a shopkeeper to the customer. So it is a normal sale. Now coming to transfer. Transfer may be a sale, may not be a sale. For example, I want to transfer my stock lying in Anand to Baroda. I have a machine for which I have to send it to for repairing to any another district. So these are the examples of transfer. Coming to barter. Simple, I provide a commodity against which I get any other commodity. You come down to any electronic shop and you say that I want a 55-inch TV, but you say I do not have any money, but I have a gold bar or a 10-gram gold or you may say so 50-gram gold. So you ask the shopkeeper of the electronic shop that, sir, I do not have any money. I'll not be able to pay you through check or cash. Instead, I'll offer you a gold bar, which is equivalent to the cost of the TV. So such transactions can get covered in barter. Now exchange. Exchange is similar to barter, but it is not completely barter. In barter, there is no consideration in kind, wherein in exchange, there may be consideration in kind as well as in money. You may, so if it is costing 1 lakh rupee, you offer him 48,000, 10 gram of gold, which is 48,000, and the remaining 52,000 you send him across a check. So such transaction can be called as exchange, wherein you go and approach him for a television and you say, I have an old television at home, I'll exchange it for it, and the remaining amount I'll be sending you the check or cash, whatever. So that transactions are exchange. License, you have heard this word in telecom sector, wherein they have to purchase the spectrum license to run their business. Even that may get covered under the word the definition of supply. Rental, lease, disposal. So these are the few other names. Made or agreed to be made for a consideration. So it is very much important that if you get covered in the definition of supply of goods or services, there should be a consideration. If you want to get fall into 7(1)(a), by a person in the course or furtherance of business. So here three things are very much important. There should be goods or services. Secondly, there should be a consideration. And thirdly, this should be in the course or furtherance of business. If any of these three fails, you don't get covered under supply, and hence GST would not be leviable. So this is one part of the definition of supply. Now coming to the second part, import of service for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. In simple example, I will explain you. If Mr. Hirel Bhai wants to construct a bungalow in Anand, for which he appoints an architect from Germany, for which he'll be paying him X amount of Germany dollars. Now here, try to understand import of service. So Mr. Hirel Bhai is importing a service of architect from Germany to India. For a consideration, he'll be paying out some German dollars to him. Whether or not in the course or furtherance of business, though the construction of a bungalow of Hirel Bhai may not be in the course of furtherance of business, even though this transaction will get covered in 7(1)(b) and it would be termed as supply. Now, how the tax is to be paid, that is a second matter. But whether this transaction gets under the terminology of supply, then the answer is yes. 7(1)(c), the activity specified in Schedule 1, made or agreed to be made without a consideration. The government is very much smart that if we come out with a law and if the taxpayers are brilliant enough to make out some loopholes, and in order to not pay tax of GST, because what 7(1)(a) says that the transaction should consist of consideration. If there is no consideration, you do not get covered into 7(1)(a), and hence supply is not triggered, no GST. But government is smart enough that let us come out with a Schedule 1 which says that activities will be termed as deemed supply, even though that transaction does not involve consideration. I'll take you to the list of Schedule 1, which says even you delve into any of such activities and there is no consideration involved, still you are supposed to pay GST. So we'll see the Schedule 1 in the subsequent slide. Now coming to 7.1a, wherein certain activities of transaction consist of supply in accordance with the provision of subsection 1, they shall be treated either as supply of goods or services as referred to in Schedule 2. Now, if those who are into GST practice since day one, they would be knowing that there was a subsection in section 7 which says that if any of the activities which are classified as goods or services in Schedule 2 will be called as supply in the first place. If I enter into any transaction, but I do not fulfill 7.1a, but my type of services are classified as goods or services in Schedule 2, then without fulfilling any condition, it would be termed as supply. So many of the representations were made stating that if I do not fulfill the 7.1a, how can you impose a deemed tax considering Schedule 2? So in the finance budget 2018, which was to an amendment bill which says that, see, if 7.1a is getting triggered, then and then only you come to Schedule 2 for classification. If you do not get covered on 7.1a, then you do not come to Schedule 2. Am I making it myself clear, right? So Schedule 2 is only to be seen when you fall under 7.1a. Now let us try to understand the details which have been provided in Schedule 2. Activities to be treated as supply even if made without consideration. So government says that you perform these four line items, I'll tax you, even though there is no consideration involved. So first is permanent transfer or disposal of business asset, where input tax credit has been availed on such asset. For example, I run my chartered accountancy firm. I install a huge printer, a huge heavy printer. After and at the time of purchase of that particular printer, I avail my input tax credit as I fulfill section 16.1 and 16.2, and I'm entitled for the credit. I avail it, I utilize it in my GSTR 3B. Now the question comes, after 5 years, the printer is not in a good condition, but it is usable, but it is not in a good condition to the pace that I want to work in. So I find an NGO or any organization wherein I want to donate this printer by not charging a single penny. So now let us read entry 1 again. A permanent transfer or disposal of business assets. I'm disposing my business asset where input tax credit has been availed on such asset. So at the time of purchase, I availed this input tax credit. So when I transfer this business asset to an NGO or to an organization without charging any consideration, still this transaction will be termed as supply and I am supposed to discharge my GST liability. How about the valuation? It will be determined as per section 15. Coming to second part of Schedule 1, supply of goods or services or both between related person or between distinct person. Related person is very much simple, having common directors, employee, employer, relatives of the directors, or between distinct persons. So distinct person has been category been described by the registration sections, which says if you hold multiple registrations under same PAN card, this multiple registrations will be termed as a distinct person for GST law. I get myself registered in Gujarat. I also get myself registered in Maharashtra. I also get myself registered in Delhi. though I have one PAN card, though my IT return would be also filed single, the consolidated one, but it would be filed only once, not for the only for the PAN card and not for the multiple registration. So this multiple registrations under GST will be called as distinct person. So any services or any movement of goods happening among these three states will be chargeable to GST, even though I'm not charging a single penny from my branch. And it is but obvious, why would I charge any single penny from my branch? Ultimately, I'm taking out from my one pocket and submitting it to my another pocket. A simple vanilla example for this entry to stock transfer. I have my unit in Gujarat. I manufacture some commodity. I have my marketing or my warehouse located in Maharashtra, and major of my customer happens to be in Maharashtra and across the states. What I do, I manufacture the product. I stock transfer this particular commodity to Maharashtra. Though the stock is moving from my one branch to another branch or from HO to another branch. So ultimately, in my books, the stock is still lying, but it is not the same case as far as GST is concerned. So here, the transferring of stock from Gujarat to Maharashtra, even though there is no consideration involved, such movement will be covered under entry 2 of Schedule 1, and hence this would be chargeable to GST. So this was the example of goods. So what could be of services? An HO in Gujarat supplying a manpower to his own subsidiary. I have one company X Limited, wherein I have sufficient amount of labor or staff, and some of them are free enough, and so I thought of deploying it to my subsidiary company. This holding and subsidiary will definitely fall under the definition of related persons. Though it being my subsidiary company, I'm not charging any amount. But even if deploying my own employees, which are on the payroll of X Limited, to my subsidiary company, will also form part of entry 2 to Schedule 1, and such transaction will be taxable. Entry 3, supply of goods by a principal to his agent, where the agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal, or by an agent to his principal, where the agent undertakes to receive such goods on behalf of principal. So under VAT laws, there was a provision that either principal or the agent will discharge the VAT liability, and both of them are not required. But that is not the case in GST. One agent is someone who helps you to buy the buyer and which helps you to buy the seller, for which the principal is not transferring the goods to the agent, but the agent is merely acting as a facilitator, and the agent will charge the commission. Such entries will not get covered in entry 3 because it is a separate transaction, a commission agent transaction. So what could get covered? A principal transferring the goods to the agent. Agent will sell these commodities to the customer of principal by issuing an invoice stating the agent's name in the bill itself. Principal transferred the goods to his agent. Agent will further sell these goods to the customer of principal. The agent issuing the tax invoice under his own name, under the agent's name, then entry 3 will be triggered. Otherwise, not. For this, the government has also issued a circular to clarify certain things, because transferring your goods to agent, and if agent sell it to the customer of principal under the name of principal, then entry 3 is not applicable over here. Hope I have made myself clear enough. Now coming to entry 4, import of service by a person from a related person or from any of his other establishment outside India in the course or furtherance of business. We saw an entry in 7.1b which says import of service for a consideration whether or not for the course or furtherance of business. Here this is something else. Over there, consideration was involved, over here consideration is not supposed to get involved. Over there, it was covering personal transaction as well as commercial transaction. Here it is only covering commercial transaction. For example, Mr. X is situated in Delhi. He runs an information technology service business. His son is located in US. Now Mr. X wishes to create or to construct a corporate house for his IT company, for which his son situated in US happens to be an architect or an engineer as well. So he takes the service of his son to construct the corporate house where he is located. He is located in India. We take for an example, we take it is located in Anand. So now let us, and no consideration is involved. Now let us read the entry again. Import of service, it is happening. Mr. X is importing service of architect from his son from US. From a related person, he is getting covered under related person. Who is outside India is outside India in the course or furtherance of business. Now, the information technology business is in the nature, or it could be also said it is in the nature of commercial activity getting placed. Mr. X is not getting it done for his personal use, but he is getting it done because of his business. So such transactions will get covered under entry 4, and Mr. X, the company of Mr. X is supposed to discharge GST under RCM liability. Because in entry, the section 7(1)(b) was addressing the word consideration. Here there is no consideration. Now what if it is not for construction of corporate house, but it is for the construction of his own bungalow? Then answer would be different. They'll not get covered under entry 4 because this is the construction of bungalow is not in the course or furtherance of business. Someone has raised a query stating that my screen is not moving. Could someone confirm me whether because currently my screen is reflecting schedule 2 declare list of so is it visible to everyone?
Yes,
Because someone
yes, visible.
okay. Now, as I was talking about Schedule 2, wherein now the government has come out with an explanation stating that if you fulfill the definition of supply force, then only you come down for classification. So now let us, for the better understanding, now let us go through the list of Schedule 2. If you do any transfer of title in goods, then the classification happens to be goods, and the tariff or the rate tariff you are supposed to refer 1/2017. And when there are services, you are supposed to refer 11/2017. Any transfer of goods or right in goods without transfer of title of goods. So it is given on hire or it is given on lease, something like that. Transfer of title in goods at a future date upon payment of full consideration. So this is sort of an hire purchase transaction wherein for a certain period of time you give it on lease, and then after at the end of the completion of your lease period, you give an option to the customer whether you want to buy it. Such transaction of selling the product to the customer will happens to be a goods. Lease of land is a service. Lease of building is a service. Treatment on other goods is a service, sort of a job work. Transfer of business asset, whether or not for a consideration, then it would be goods. Use of business goods for private use, whether or not for consideration. So here the question that was raised in the earlier days, that because these words which are given in the schedule 2, which says the use of business goods for private use whether or not for consideration. For example, as Hiral Bhai being a chartered accountant, he runs his practice. So he have a certain amount of employees, he have certain amount of articles looking after the work. So Hiralbhai thought that due to this pandemic, now let us shift ourselves from a computer to a laptop, because work from home is the need of the hour currently. So Hiralbhai thought that let us give two laptops to our senior people who will be working it from home. Now, the moment you give him the laptop, he'll take it to his home. It may happen that during the day of 10 to 6 job or 10 to 7 or 10 to 8 job, he's doing his office work across the day. Now, in the evening, he's tired of, he thought of, now let us watch a movie. And he may not be able to get it on the TV. So he thought of, now let me switch it on Netflix or Amazon Prime and I'll see the movie and enjoy my evening. And if the same enjoyment by the employee or the staff of visiting and watching the movie on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and that happens to be on the same laptop what Hiral Bhai gave it to him, then even such transactions were deemed as supply under the law. So this was stretching. It is just like a stretching of an imagination to what extent you can get the transaction under the levy. So many people represented the issue and asked the government that, sir, look, first of all, get under the word supply. Then after you tell me whether it is goods or services, and then after you tell me what rate I'm supposed to pay. But merely classification should not be the effect of deemed supply. So this the phrase which I used is use of business goods for private use, whether or not for consideration, will be a service, but for in the first place it has to be a supply. Recovery of asset under debt, goods, asset retained after closure of business, goods, renting of an immovable property. So leasing out your commercial space, leasing out your residency is a service. Though the leasing out your residency for dwelling purpose is exempt, but at the first place it is a service. Sale of under construction units, it's a service. Transfer of intellectual property rights, is a service. IT software service, agreeing to the obligation to do an act or refrain from an act. So this will see a time to come where a lot of litigation is going to happen in this particular phrase. Was contract is a service. Transfer of right to use service. Supply of food as a part of service. So if you go into a restaurant and then you order any meal, then it is a service. But if you go down to a provisional store and ask for chips or a biscuit, then it would be classified as goods. Supply of goods by unincorporated association to its members. So any of the incorporated association, if they send it up, sell any goods to its member, then it would be sale of goods. Now, why this classification has come into picture under these laws? Because earlier also such transactions used to happen. But this time government thought of let us bring with the proper classification, because in the earlier law there was a lot of confusion if whether such transaction is a goods, then let us go to VAT. If such transaction is service, let us go to service tax. So there was a lot of litigation which happened in the earlier days, because there was a constitutional article which was 366(29)(a), which was giving a demeaning effect that if you enter into such transaction, these are goods, and similar transaction is also getting covered by service tax law. So if you see, if you have visited yourself in restaurant, VAT was also levied, service tax also levied. If you see the software activity, VAT was also levied, service tax was also levied. If you see the construction industry before GST, VAT was also levied and service tax was also levied. So just to keep a rest on such type of settled litigations, they have come out with this classification. Now coming to Schedule 3. Now Schedule is it is important, which is addressing that activity or transaction which shall be treated neither as a supply of goods, neither as a supply of services. So if you get covered into Schedule 3, you are least concerned with the GST Act itself. So let us go one by one. Service by an employee to the employer in the course or relation to his employment. So any of the staffs which are deployed to Hiralbai office and they serve to his office for a fixed salary pay, then such transaction will not get covered under GST and it will not be termed as service even and will get covered under Schedule 3 and it would be termed as neither supply of goods nor services. But that too, it should be in the course or furtherance of employment. If Hiralbai offers him extra pay stating that you do not do it for employment, I have some other work, kindly get into the arrangement and I'll pay you some amount of percentage, then such may get covered under the terminology of supply. Tax, paying the tax or getting the registration is secondary thing, but whether such transaction gets covered under supply is very much important. Service by any court or tribunal established under any law court timing. So if you go to high courts or tribunal, you see their services are outside the ambit of GST. Similarly, government has secured their MPs and all other state legislature member and the panchayat members, even their term of service to the government of India or to the state legislature will also happens to be outside the ambit of GST. Service of funeral, burial, crematorium or mortuary, including transportation of deceased. So currently, due to this pandemic, we are witnessing many deaths due to this COVID-19. So the services of the funeral or in Gujarati we say Shamshan, burial, crematory, mortuary, and such services for though you pay some amount to them, but such services are also outside the ambit of GST. Even the transportation of dead bodies is also outside the ambit of GST. Coming to sale of land and subject to clause B of paragraph 5 schedule 2 and sale of building. Very, very, very important. Here they are not addressing immovable property, but they are addressing land and building. I have good piece of land in my native place and I sell that particular land, then there is no GST applicable because it is outside the ambit of GST. But on that particular land, I construct a commercial property or a residential property and I sell it to the potential buyers. Then I'll get covered under the section 7 and I'm supposed to pay GST. If you know that after constructing any property, a bungalow or a residential apartments or a commercial spaces, after the end of construction, they have this particular procedure of obtaining completion certificate or a BU in common parlance. Once you receive this completion certificate or a BU, and then after you sell to a buyer, a unit to a buyer post completion of certificate, that is sale of building. That will not get covered under Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 or Section 7 here. It will get covered under Schedule 3 and you are not supposed to charge GST on that particular amount. But constructing a commercial space, constructing a residential apartment, and during the course of construction, you get a potential buyer, on such activities, GST will be applicable. Actionable claims other than lottery, betting, and gambling. So if it is a lottery or betting or gambling, then GST is applicable. 7, 8 are the recent ones which have been amended while the amendment bill 2018, which was effective from 1st of February 2019, which says supply of goods from a place in non-taxable territory to another place in non-taxable territory without such goods entering into India. So two advance ruling, one from Karnataka and one from Gujarat. Before this amendment, the advance ruling of Karnataka came, which appreciated the spirit of law and stated that if a person situated in India orders a commodity from China and ship it to Malaysia by not bringing the goods in India, so these are also known as merchant trades. So the concern company went down to the Advanced Bank of Karnataka and stated that if it is not coming to the taxable territory, how can we tax this transaction? So they ruled out that such transaction will not get covered under GST and GST is not applicable, even though this entry number 7 was not there. Once from 1st February 2019, this entry came down into Schedule 3 and a pending advance ruling was there in Gujarat, and they stated that such transactions will get covered under GST and you are supposed to pay a GST liability. So to which I do not agree, because once the commodity or the goods are not coming into India, is not coming to the taxable territory, the law itself does not apply. So now post amendment, it has been made very much clear that such transaction which is moving from non-taxable territory to another non-taxable territory without bringing it to India will happen to be outside the purview of GST. Coming to entry 8, which is supply of warehouse goods to any person before clearance of home consumption. Now, let me give you an example. I manufacture some commodity for which I need a raw material which is not available in India. So I thought of import it from, for example, from Germany. So I import it. It has crossed the port, but it has not crossed the custom frontiers. It can be only cross the custom frontier once you file the bill of entry. And in bill of entry, you have to discharge upfront the custom duty and IGST. Once it is paid, then and then only you can clear these goods. Now, due to lack of funds or any of the other reason, I could not clear my goods and it is still lying at the port. So I thought of, let me store these goods at a warehouse. So what I'll do, I'll file an inbound bill of entry and we'll store it in a warehouse which are located in port, because in a lot of the ports there are a lot of warehouses where you can store your goods, because it may happen that people may not be in arrangement of funds at the particular point of time, so they may hold their goods at the port, and once the funds are arranged they clear these goods. So I warehouse these goods at Mundra port, for example. Over a period of time I could not arrange the funds, so I thought of let me sell this raw material to someone else. Still I have not cleared the good, still I have not filed bill of entry, still I have not paid the customer IGST. So I thought of selling these goods from the warehouse itself. So I got a customer and I sold this particular goods to some another customer. So whether such transactions get covered under GST? The answer is no. It says supply of warehouse goods, the goods which are already warehoused, to any person before clearance for home consumption. So if you file in a bill of entry by paying custom and IGST, it is equivalent that you are clearing for your home consumption. You are clearing it for your factory usage. So such transaction of selling the goods which were warehoused to another person before it gets cleared for home consumption, then it get covered under 8A. Supply of goods by consignee to another person by endorsement of document of title to goods after the goods have been dispatched from port of origin located outside India but before clearance of home consumption. A long phrase, in simple terminology, it is an high seas sales. I import something, and during the course of import, I thought of selling it to someone else. I sell it to someone else when it was during the course of transportation, maybe from air or maybe from it is through a marine transportation. I thought of selling it to someone else. Before the transportation started from the overseas supplier, sorry, after the transaction started from the overseas supplier and before it is getting touched to India, I sell this particular goods to someone else. Even such sale or such supply will not get covered under GST, and it get covered under Schedule 3, and you are not supposed to charge or pay GST. But the person to whom you have sold these goods will definitely file a bill of entry and clear it from home consumption. So at that particular point in time, will be paying IGST. Please kindly confirm in the chat box whether so far so good, or do you have any sort of queries with respect to the topics that I have covered right now. Now coming to a very important section, levy and collection. Once the supply is confirmed, you come down to how it is to be charged, how it is to be paid, at what value, at what rate, what kind of tax. The question, every question comes after when you confirm that it is a supply. Now it is confirmed that it is a supply. Now let us see the section 9, which talks about levy and collection. Very important to go through the phrases of this subsection. Subject to provision of subsection 2, there shall be a levied a tax called CGST. We are reading CGST Act, so that is why they are covering CGST. If you look after SGST, there would be state GST, and if you see IGST Act, they will be stating IGST on all intrastate supply of goods or services or both. So here it makes it very much clear that if you want to charge CGST, it should be on all three intrastate supplies only, and that too on goods and services only, nothing else, except on supply of alcoholic liquor for human consumption on the value determined under section 15. The law says there will be a tax called as CGST, but on what type of transaction? On all intrastate supplies. Goods or services, it could be goods, it could be service, it could be both. But on what value? That value you have to determine under section 15. But at what rate? The rate of CGST under the law should not exceed 20%. Now in the chat box, kindly mention that what is the highest rate of CGST notified. Waiting for the responses in the chat box. What is the highest rate of CGST under GST law? Waiting for the responses. Mr. Vasani, 28% is put together of CGST and SGST. So I've got two answers right from Mr. Martin and Mr. Tanmay, which says 14%. So currently the highest rate of CGST is 14%. The government has given a capping limit. The government has given a capping limit of 20%. So tomorrow, if they wish to come out with a more rate than 14%, then it would be 20%. I'm grateful to the participation who have given the responses in chat box. Mr. Mehul, you are correct. 14% is right answer. So government has a freedom to charge more tax, but it should not be more than 20%. As may be notified by the government on the recommendation on council, collected in such manner, how it is to be collected and paid, for which they'll prescribe, and it should be paid by the taxable person. Here the word they have not written registered person, they have written taxable person. There are two. The difference between two is taxable person is a person who is supposed to get themselves registered under the law, and registered person is a person who is already registered under the law. If, how will it make any difference? I render any service, I supply any goods, but I am under that impression that these services or these goods are exempt. So I didn't take any registration. But after 2 years, it came to know that this transactions were taxable. So government raided my office and wanted to demand me the tax. So I may not be registered under the law, but I am a taxable person because I am supposed to discharge my liability under the law. If the word here would have written registered person, then first of all you have to get yourself registered, and then only you could have discharged the liability. Subsection 2, very important. So these are the items wherein though it is covered by the law, but for the timing they have kept in abeyance the central tax on supply of petrol crude, high-speed diesel, motor spirit, natural gas, and aviation turbine fuel shall be levied with effect from such date notified by the government on the recommendation of the council. So they have already added in the law, but they have not notified. So still these items are, though it is in the law, but it is kept outside the ambit of taxable supply. So these items are called as non-taxable supplies. Supply but not taxed, and it will be taxed from the date on which they'll get notified. 9.3 and 9.4, I believe that everyone who are into their articleship or who are into their practice would be well versed with this particular section. So 9.3 is notifying the categories of supply of goods and services on which the recipient of the service or goods is supposed to discharge their liability, and this liability is to be discharged on the notified goods or the services. So for goods, there are raw cotton, BD leaves, tobacco, which are under RCM. And for services, there are transportation service, advocate services, security service, rent a cab, director sitting fees. So there are list of services and goods which are being notified by referring to section 9.3, on which the recipient is supposed to discharge the liability under reverse charge. Coming to 9.4, the phrase that has been published in the screen was not same before 1st February 2019. It said that if you deal with unregistered person of supply of goods or services, rather I would use the word supply of taxable goods or services, then the recipient was supposed to pay the GST under RCA. But post February 2019, they have come out with a new provision which says, though this will cover any procurement from unregistered supplier, but we will notify such class of registered person. So currently there is no notification given with reference to 9 subsection 4. If you talk about the earlier provision in GST for section 9 subsection 4, which says that you are supposed to pay RCM for the procurement of goods or services, the procurement of taxable goods or services from unregistered supplier. People used to do so. The government came out with a notification that we give you a capping limit of 5,000 per day expense. So if your expense is more than 5,000 per day from unregistered supplier, you pay the tax on all of it. If not, then you're not supposed to pay the GST RCM. After 13th October 2017, they suspended this particular provision. So when you have conducted 17-18 GST audit, you have asked every of your taxpayer that and confirmed that whether they have paid the RCM liability under section 9.4 from a period up to 1st of July till 12th of October. Then they suspended it for one more year, then one more year, and finally they came out with a new provision which was effective from February 2019, that we will notify the class of registered person to which this particular subsection will be applicable. So I've given a summary that levy and chargeable under the law. So what is levied or what is chargeable under this law? The tax called GST. What sort of activities of supply will be covered? Goods or services or both? Or on what value? As per section 15. How it is to be collected and paid? You have to refer payment rules. So kindly be noted that wherever in the law the words which are used prescribed, you have to refer it to the rules. Payable by taxable person, payable when? This will be decided by time of supply. Payable what? How it is to be paid, IGST or CNS, then it should be place of supply you have to refer. Types of supplies: taxable supply, taxable as per section 7, zero rated supply, two options, taxable with payment of tax under LUT, exempt supply, taxable but exempted by virtue of notification. Very much important for all the aspirants of chartered accountant, that any exempted item by the virtue of exemption notification is deemed to be taxable at the first place. What if I remove any entries from exemption notification? It will become taxable. So the moment exemption notification is introduced for any list of services or any list of goods, at the first place it were taxable, but due to exemption notification, it has been exempted. Non-taxable supply, the exclusion what we referred into section 9 subsection 2. No supply which is outside the ambit of GST, which is schedule 3. Now composite and mixed supply, section 8. I'll go first with composite supply. Let us read the definition and understand. Supply or two or more supply of goods or services or any combination thereof which are naturally bundled. This concept was there in service tax and supplied in conjunction with each other in the ordinary course of business, and out of which one should be a principal supply. In the law, they have given a simple example for a better understanding, which says, I transport a goods from Anand to Rajkot, for which I'm transferring or I'm transporting the goods, but along with it, I am also providing freight and insurance to the customer. So for transporting the goods, I charge him 50,000. Along with him, the services that I'm giving to my customer, I'll charge freight. Along with it, I'm also giving the service of insurance of this particular goods to my customer. So combination of these three supplies is a composite supply, and here it being a naturally bundled supply, here the principal supply happens to be transportation of goods. Let us take another example. In vacation, we wish to go out for an outing or outskirts tourings or going to resort or hotels, wherein we do not only book the accommodation, but along with it, they provide you a complimentary breakfast. Correct? The word naturally bundle is to be conceived from the customer perspective. Though they are only providing you the service of accommodation, but as well as the breakfast in the morning. So here the principal supply is the accommodation service and not the morning breakfast. So the amount that they will charge you for the accommodation along with the breakfast, wherein the principal supply is the accommodation service, the GST is to be charged on the accommodation services and the rate is to be taken accordingly and not on the morning restaurant or a breakfast services provided. So if you see the definition of principal supply, which says, means the supply of goods or services which constitutes the predominant element of a composite supply, to which any other supply forming part of that composite supply is ancillary and does not constitute for the recipient an aim in itself, but a means for a better enjoyment of principal supply. For example, currently you will be undergoing any CA coaching classes. Those CA coaching class, the rendition is a service, but they also give you some material in hard copy, right? They are also giving you the coaching services. Along with it, they are also giving you the hard copy materials. So such combinations are naturally bundled and they are termed as composite supply. Here the principal supply happens to be coaching classes and the rate of tax is to be decided on the basis of what is the principal supply. Now coming to mixed supply, which says means two or more individual supplies of goods or services or any combination thereof for a single price where such supply does not constitute a composite supply. So it is obvious that if it is not a composite supply, we have to classify it as a mixed supply. Let me give you an example. There is a packet of Cadbury Celebration that we used to offer it to our known relative ones at the time of Diwali. In the new celebration packet, they are also coming up with some dry fruits, with some chocolates, and with some other chocolate ingredients. Here, dry fruits may be taxed at in some another rate, the chocolates may be taxed at some another rates, and any other ancillary product which is along with this celebration packet will also bear some another GST rate. Now, what is happening? You come down to a store and you ask him for a Cadbury celebration. He'll give you the packet, and against which you are only supposed to pay a single price. If he says 100 rupees. So there are 5 items in Cadbury celebration for which you are giving the consideration 100 rupees. Now let us examine this transaction as per the definition. Means 2 or more individual supply. There are dry foods, there are chocolates of goods or service or any combinations of both are goods for a single price. So they are not charging for dry fruit separately. They are not charging for chocolate separately. They are charging it together for a single price. So here we are fulfilling the conditions of mixed supply. Now, at what rate the tax is to be paid, whether on the rate of dry foods or whether at the rate of chocolate. So it says the tax is to be paid which bears the highest rate of tax. If dry foods is taxed at 5% and chocolate is bared at rate 18%, so at the entire consideration of 100, you are supposed to discharge 18%. There are also some customized packages. You take some cosmetic items, you take some dry fruits, you take some other chocolates, you take some souvenirs for the customers. So that whole pack of bundle, you also come together with sort of international chips, and you bundle it together and offer it to someone. So getting it from a shopkeeper for which everyone would be has the capacity of getting sold individually as well. You can get chips separately, you can get the cosmetic items separately, you can get the chocolate separately. But you have forcefully bundled it, and for which the shopkeeper says, for all these items, I'll charge you 1000 rupees. And if chips happens to be at the highest rate of tax, you are supposed to pay GST at the entire consideration, looking at the rate of chips because it bears the highest rate of tax. Now coming to time of supply. My transaction is getting covered under supply. I'm supposed to pay tax. I also know the value. I also know the rate. But when to be discharged? So for which time of supply is important. We'll cover goods and then we'll cover services. So section 12 of CGST Act is covering the liability of the time of supply for goods, and section 13 will address time of supply for services. So section 12 says earliest of following: date of issue of invoice or last date on which supplier is required to raise invoice as per section 31 of CGST Act, or date of which the supplier receives the payment. The second one got deleted with effect from 15th November 2017, wherein I am supposed to sell a commodity to someone else, or some customer, for which I ask him that I want an advance for this supplying the goods. So he gave me the advance. If this transaction happened before 15th of November 2017, then on the date on which I received the advance, that particular month will be my time of supply. But if this happens to be post 15th November 2017, today is 11th of May, I get an order of supplying 1000 tons of cement, for which I ask him the advance. He pays me tomorrow on 12th of May. I deliver it him on 13th of I issue an invoice on 13th of May and dispatch it from my factory, and it reaches to his factory on 15th of May. So for this particular transaction, the time of supply will be 13th of May, the date on which I issue the invoice. Now, considering that the second condition is deleted, the date on which the supplier received the payment is deleted, eliminated, The above two says date of issue an invoice or the last date on which the supplier is required to raise invoice as per section 31. Section 31 says that before, on or before the removal of goods, you are supposed to raise the invoice. I raise it today on 11th of May and I deliver it or it dispatch it from my factory on 15th of May, then I am fulfilling the condition of section 31 as well as section 12 subsection 2. But if I do not issue the invoice and dispatch my material for sale, then the last date on which I was supposed to issue the invoice, what is the date on which I dispatch the goods from my factory. 11th was the date on which I was supposed to raise the invoice, because on 11th I dispatched some commodity, but I didn't. So 11 becomes my last date on which I am supposed to raise the invoice. So usually what we have observed across the trade, that people who supply anything, maximum to maximum they issue the invoice to that period itself. You go to a shopkeeper and ask for an iPhone and they'll give you the invoice. So the invoice would be on the date on which you are buying it. It may also happen that if it is a huge factory wherein transportation is required, wherein it may take 10-15 days. So the date of receipt to the customer would be some another date and the date of invoice would be some another date. If I dispatch it today on 11th of May and my customer receives it on 20th of May, then still my time of supply happens to be 11th of May and I'm supposed to discharge my liability accordingly. To reverse charge mechanism, so there is one notification which is covering the list of goods wherein reverse charge is applicable and the recipient is supposed to discharge the liability. So how the time of supply is to be determined? It is to be determined as per subsection 3 of section 12, which says earliest of the following: the date on which you receive the goods, the date of payment is entered in the books of accounts, or the when it is debited from the bank account, or the date immediately following 30 days from the date of invoice by supplier. On 11th of May, my supplier, I being the customer, my supplier sold me the goods which is falling under the list of RCN, and he also raised the invoice on 11th of May. He delivered it, but I didn't receive it today. I received it on 12th of May, which is tomorrow. Now on 15th of May, I am paying it to him, the consideration. So in this particular circumstances, what will be the time of supply? The time of supply will be the date of receipt of goods, which is tomorrow, which is 12th of May. Vouchers, section 12 subsection 4, very important section. I would request everyone, the participant, to understand this particular section. You must refer the order of appellate authority for advance ruling in case of Kalyan Jewellers India Limited, wherein they have describedly mentioned that how whether voucher is to be taxed or whether the goods is to be taxed. For example, you get a voucher from a jewelry store which says if you buy some gold jewelry or a silver jewelry, you will get 5,000 rupees off. Here the voucher does not define or identify whether it will be earrings, whether it would be bangles, whether it would be the necklace, whether it would be a bracelet. So here the supply is not identified. They have only mentioned that will give you certain amount of discount or certain rupees off on purchase of jewelry. But that particular jewelry could be necklace, could be chain, could be earring, could be bracelet, could be anything. So when the supply is not identified at the time of issue of voucher, then the tax is going to happen at the date when you redeem your voucher. But if that particular voucher states you buy one chain, will offer you a discount of 500. So the voucher is establishing the supply, that we are going to supply you a chain. At that particular of time, when you issue the voucher to the customer, you are supposed to discharge your GST liability accordingly. If today, if someone gives you a voucher stating will give you 500 rupees off on purchase of gold, jewelry, and that too a necklace, then today my time of supply gets triggered. But today I offer a voucher to someone stating you'll get 5,000 rupees off on purchase of jewelry. So that customer comes after 1 month in June and selects one of the jewelry, and it costs 20,000. So he'll redeem this voucher of 5,000, and 15,000 would be the net effect. So the June months becomes my time of supply, and I have to discharge the liability accordingly. So I'll be discharging my GST liability on 15,000 and not on 20,000, because I'm using or I'm redeeming my voucher. Continuous supply of goods is not so important because it only happens in some of the other industry. Though Adani gas is not the gas which is provided by Adani gas does not fall under GST. But you can take an example from the way they supply. At our home, we have this gas pipeline. Similarly, in the factories, there are certain petroleum items which are taxable under GST. They get it from the person who is manufacturing it. So here, on continuous basis, the goods are moving to the factory of the customer. So this section state where a successive statement or accounts of successive payment are involved, the invoice shall be issued before or at the time of each statement issued, as the case may be. So we get a statement from Adani Gas every month stating that this is the amount we are supposed to pay. So similarly, the supplier of these chemicals or the certain petroleum products which is given to the customers, they issue this some successive statement that for this particular month on this date you have used this amount of tons or this amount of kilograms, and that too you'll be paying it. This particular section will cover some apparels, some jewelry stores, which says that if you send any commodity for approval, then such may shall take place at the time of acceptance or after the completion of 6 months. For example, if I have a known jeweler or I have a known garment store owner, I'll tell him that kindly send 5 pieces of shirt, 5 pieces of jeans at my home. Let me check it out, and I'll confirm you whichever I like, and we'll order it accordingly. So, for example, today is 11th of May, and he sends these 10 items to me. If I check it out, if it is fit to me, I give the order. The day on which I show my acceptance, probably on 13th or 15th of May, I show my acceptance. And at that particular date would be the time of supply. But getting this product at my home of 11th of May, and I do not answer it for a period of 6 months from 11th of May, the day on which 6 months gets over, that will be my time of supply. Either I sell it, I do not like it, I give it back to you. But I keep it with me, I do not show the acceptance, and it happens to be with me over a period of 6 months, then the end of 6 months will be my time of supply. Will request the participants, so far so good as far as levy and collection and time of supply of goods is concerned. Please kindly show your confirmation in the chat box. Participants, I'm waiting for the confirmation. So far so good. Do you have any queries as far as levy collection and time of supply of goods are concerned? So now let us consider time of supply of services in the similar manner. In this similar manner, what we discuss for time of supply of goods, we have it for time of supply of services. For the services that we render, if it is the invoice is issued within prescribed period, then the date of invoice or the payment which is earlier. We had the similar provision in service tax law as well. The same has been copy pasted and brought to this law. Invoice issued within prescribed period, and the prescribed period is been given in the rules which says 30 days for the general services and 45 days for the non-banking services. So today, if I provide any consultancy services to my client, and from today I get an opportunity to invoice him within 30 days, probably 10th of June, 10th of June, right? If I do so, then either date of payment or date of receipt of payment, which is earlier, will be my time of supply. For example, today I conduct a service. I also complete my service today itself. On 15th of May, I raise an invoice, and on 20th of May, I get the payment. Now, participants kindly tell me what would be my time of supply for this transaction. On 11th of May, I provide the services. Within 30 days, I issue the invoice on 15th of May, and I receive this payment on 20th of May. So, what would be my time of supply for this sort of transaction? I'm waiting your responses in the chat box. So fortunately, one answer has come. The second is also on the way. So the answer is the date of invoice, which is 15th of May. Now let us take a same example. 11th of May, I give the services. I get the payment of 13th of May, and I issue the invoice on 31st of May. 11th is the date of completion of service. 13th May is the date on which I receive the payment, and 30th is the date on which I issue the invoice. In this transaction, what will be my time of supply? I've received one answer, but that is incorrect. Waiting for the correct answers. Mr. Tanmay has given the answer that it would be on 15th of May. See, the correct answer is 15th of May, because what it says, if you raise the invoice within 30 days, so I'm issuing the invoice within 30 days. From 11th of May, I have up to 10th of June, and I raise it on 31st of May. So I'm fulfilling the condition. So if I do so, I have to see either invoice or date of payment, whichever is earlier. On 15th of May, I'm getting the payment, and on 30th of May, I'm raising the invoice. So payment has been earlier. So the date of payment will be the date of time of supply. So thankful to the participant. Now coming to another option, if I do not do so, I give the service today, I do not raise the invoice at all, and I get the payment on 15th of May. So what would be the time of supply here? Please mention your responses in the chat box. I give the service today, I get the payment on 15th of May, but I do not raise the invoice, or either I raise the invoice at the end of June, which is beyond 30 days. So those who have mentioned the answers are correct. It would be the 11th of May, the date of service. So really appreciate the answer by everyone. Coming to reverse charge mechanism, so we have GTA service, we have advocate service, we have sponsorship, we have security, we have rent a cab, we have director sitting fees. So in such transaction where when you are supposed to discharge the reverse charge liability, earliest of following date of payment, date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue, and date on which the recipient shows the receipt of service in the books. If in case A and B is not applicable, but it is the rarest opportunity that will happen. For example, on 1st of April, you get a invoice of advocate for legal services of rupees 1 lakh. I pay him the fees on 11th of May today. I get this service on 1st of April. I pay him the consideration on 11th of May. So kindly let me know what would be the time of supply over here. 1st of April, 11th of May, or 60 days after the date of invoice. That would be, I guess, 31st of May. So 1st of April, 11th of May, or 31st of May. What will be the time of supply for this particular transaction? Awaiting your responses in chat box. So someone has written 11th of May, someone has written date of invoice, some has written 1st April. So kindly note over here, they are not referring to the date of issue of invoice anywhere. If you see, they are only considering two situations: either the date on which you do the payment, or 60 days after the date of issue of invoice. So on 1st of April, I get an invoice or the invoice is raised. I have to calculate 60 days from the end of from 1st April. So that happens to be 31st of May. Either 31st of May or 11th May, whichever is earlier I have. So for those who have written 1st of April, the answer is not 1st of May, it is 11th of May. I have to only consider date of issue of invoice to determine what would be the 61st day. The only relevance. Otherwise, date of issue of invoice is not at all relevant over here. I have to see 60 days from the 1st April, which is 31st May, or on the date on which I get the payment. So really appreciate to those who have written 11th of May. Vouchers. So similarly, the way I have explained for good, it is aptly follows the voucher for services. You take it for restaurant services. If some restaurant service gives you a voucher that if you uh, buy so and so meal, will offer you a discount. So that is general discount. But if you go to Domino's and if they offer you a discount on pizza and not any other product, then the date of issue of voucher where the supply is identified. So Domino's is supposed to discharge GST liability on the day when they issue the voucher. And if some other restaurant give you an offer that if you come down to our place, we'll give you 500 rupees off. But on what meal? You do not know. You may go out for sandwiches, you may go out for bhaji pav, you may go out for chana puri. So for such transaction where the supply is not identified, the tax will be paid at the date on the voucher is redeemed. Continuous supply of service, mostly for works contractor and construction companies, where the due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract, the invoice shall be issued on or before the due date of payment. For example, I get a contract from Hindustan Coca-Cola to construct their factory. I am the contractor. The contract says that at the end of every month, I am supposed to raise the invoice, or at the end of every month, I'm going to get the payment from Hindustan Coca-Cola for the services I provide. Now, the due date of payment is ascertainable because it says that every end of the month you'll get the payment. So for such contract, when I'm supposed to raise the invoice, on or before due date of payment, either on the 30th day or the 31st day or the 20th day of the month, 20th for the February, for apart from the last day of the month, or before that, I'm supposed to raise the invoice. If I take this month, 31st of May is the last date, I'm going to get the payment from the Hindustan Coca-Cola. So for that particular payment, I'm going to raise the bill either on 31st of May or before that. Second, where the due date of payment is not ascertainable from the contract, the invoice shall be issued before the time of when the supplier of service receives the payment. So you may see in builder that as and when they get the advances, they pay the taxes. There are certain organized builders, they'll get cover under clause C, but there are certain unorganized builders wherein they say that as and when you pay me, we'll take into consideration. So here the contract does not involve the certainty of payment date. So they'll be paying the GST liability as and when the payment is received. So as and when they receive the payment, they are supposed to raise the invoice. Now coming to the organized builders, which is in the clause C, which says where the payment is linked to the completion of an event, the invoice shall be issued on or before date of completion of that event. So this is sort of a event obligating payment. The builder, there are certain loan sanctioning from the banks which says that if you dig down your second basement, will sanction you so and so amount. You come down to plinth level, will sanction you so and so amount. You come down to fifth floor, will sanction you so and so amount. So in the agreement to sell contract, the organized builder states that as and when some of the event we had completed, the customer is supposed to pay the amount. So if first floor is completed in the contract, it says that you are supposed to give us 20 lakh of check. And if you complete fifth floor up to fifth floor, then you are supposed to pay 25 lakh of check. Then you complete 10th floor, you are supposed to pay the remaining amount. So as and when the completion of floor is happening according to the contract, you have to issue the invoice as and when the completion of event is happening. So usually you will see it in most of the organized builder wherein they have good list of due dates where the payment gets due from the customers. So this is one subsection not so important, so I'm just keeping it out due to paucity of time. Now nature of supply, I'll just run by the provision which says, so this is this section is getting covered under IGST Act section 7. So these are certain subsections which are describing the situations that when you are supposed to determine or termed it as interstate supply. It says that if the location of supplier and the place of supply are in two different states, or they are in two different union territories, or if they are in one state or one another union territory, then such will be known as interstate supply and IGST will be legible. For import of goods, they have stated that till they cross the custom frontiers of India, it will be termed as interstate supply. As I mentioned earlier at the starting of my slide, that imports are also considered as interstate supply as per section 7 subsection 2. 7.1 is talking about goods, 7.3 is talking about services. The similar way, two different states, interstate transaction, two different union territories, interstate transaction, one state, one union territory, interstate transaction. And supply of service imported into a territory of India shall be treated as interstate transaction. So these are very categorically mentioned that when the supplier is located in India and place of supply is outside India. So I talked about export in the starting of the slide. Even exports are also known as interstate supply. That is why you get another option with payment of tax on which you charge and pay IGST. So from this particular subsection, we get the empowerment. Another clause is by to or by a special economic developer or special economic unit. So any supply of service or goods that you do to SEZ or SEZ unit or SEZ developer, it will be termed as interstate supply. For example, there is a Mundra SEZ, though it is located in Gujarat. So from Anand, someone sells any commodity or services to some SEZ developer located in Mundra SEZ. though they happens to be in same state, but as per clause B of subsection 5, section 7, it will be termed as interstate supply. And IGST is to be levied. Either you do it under LUT or you do with payment of tax. And 7.5C is just in residual entry, which says that if you do not covered under the section 8, which is talking about intrastate supply, then you come down to you come down here and will be taxed at IGST, which says supply of goods or services are both in the taxable territory, not being an intrastate supply and not covered elsewhere in this section, shall be treated to be goods, supply of goods or services or both in the course of interstate trade or commerce. So if it is not an interstate supply, if it not happens to be fulfilled under section 8, which is talking about interstate supply, you come down to this residual entry and you pay IGST and relieve yourself. Interstate supply, similar provision. You have same, if you are into same state, intrastate. If you are into same union territory, intrastate. But what shall not be considered as intrastate? The example which I gave you for SEZ, though you have SEZ, Mundra and Anand happen to be in Gujarat, still the transaction happening between these two will be interstate and not intrastate. Goods imported into territory of India till they cross the custom frontier or supply made to tourists referred it to in section 15. So if any tourist comes to your place and buy any goods or commodity, then it is an interstate supply. So here the section 15 is talking about section 15 of IGST. So 8.1 was for goods, 8.2 is for services. Similar provision, same state, intrastate, same union territory, intrastate, will not cover SEZ transactions. So small summary. Location of supplier and place of supply are in different state. Then it is intrastate. Location of supplier and place of supply are in different state. Then it is interstate. See, we can very well determine where the location of supplier is, but how do we determine where the place of supply is, for which we have to refer section 10, section 11, section 12 and section 13. The moment you decide what is your place of supply, it becomes easier for you whether it gets into section 7 or whether it gets into section 8. In simple word, once the place of supply is determined, you are in a position to determine whether it is interstate or whether it is an intrastate transaction. So a summary has been put before you. We will also share the PPT post the completion of session. So if in case you have skipped any of the slides, then you can definitely go through it. Place of supply of goods other than import and export. So section 10 is only addressing domestic transaction. Section 11 is addressing import and export. So I'll not get into the legal phrases of law. I'll just simply, due to paucity of time, I'll just simply cover the issues or what they're trying to address. 10.1a says, if you supply any goods and if that goods requires movement, then the place of supply will be the location of the goods at the time at which the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. I, being in Gujarat, I manufacture a commodity. I have a customer in Maharashtra. I sell this commodity to Maharashtra by transporting the commodity from my factory to the place of Maharashtra. So 10.1a, according to this particular clause, the place of supply for the transaction that I discussed will be Maharashtra. Location of goods at which the movement of goods terminates for delivery to the recipient. So my goods terminates for delivery at the place at which my customer is located. Coming to 10.1b, which says, rather I would say they are addressing build to ship to transaction. I, being in Gujarat, Mr. A, I get an order from Mr. B, who is in Rajasthan, and intimates me and instructs me that Mr. A, kindly dispatch or ship these goods to Mr. C in Maharashtra. So I, being Mr. A, will raise an invoice not to C, but I'll raise the invoice to Mr. B in Rajasthan, and I will ship these goods to Mr. C in Maharashtra. The first transaction is happening between Mr. A and B, and second is happening between B and C. So I'll raise the invoice by charging IGST. Why so? This particular provision says the place of supply will be the place where this third party is directing you to send these goods. So Mr. B is directing me that kindly ship these goods to Maharashtra. So I have to look the location from where he is giving me the direction. Now the second transaction is between Rajasthan and Maharashtra, which is Mr. B to Mr. C. So that would be covered under 10(1)(a). So that is a normal transaction. So delivery is terminating in Maharashtra. So Mr. B will raise the invoice in IGST to Maharashtra. Now let us take an example that Mr. A is in Ahmedabad, Mr. B is in Anand, and Mr. C is in Delhi. Similar direction, similar sort of transaction. So Mr. A will charge to Mr. B, who is located in Anand, not IGST but CGST and SGST, because the location from where he is directing me is in Gujarat. So being the location of supplier and place of supply being in Gujarat, I'll be charging CGST and SGST. Mr. B will be charging IGST to Mr. C, who is located in Delhi, according to 10(1)(a). 10(1)(c) is talking about where the goods does not involve movement of goods. For example, I have leased out my machine from Gujarat to Rajasthan for a period of 2 years. I have leased out my machine to a customer in Rajasthan. Now it is still there since 2 years. Now the customer is telling me that kindly sell this particular machine to me. I want to buy it out. The machine is located in his factory. It has not moved an inch since 2 years. So such transaction will get covered under 10(1)(c), which says the place of supply will be the location of goods where the delivery to the recipient is happening. So the delivery is happening in Rajasthan to the customer where the machine is located. So I'll be charging IGST because the location of supplier and place of supply are different. Where the goods are assembled or installed at site, the place of supply shall be the place of such installation or assembly. So Mr. X, who is located in Delhi, wishes to create a power plant in Maharashtra, for which he appoints someone in Gujarat to supply material which is going to get assembled in power plant. So for the supplier who is located in Gujarat, supplying the machines to Maharashtra where the power plant is going to get assembled, or you can also say that it is going to get installed at this site, the place of supply shall be the place where such installation or assembly is happening. So where is the installation happening? It is happening in Maharashtra. For the supplier in Gujarat, the place of supply will be Maharashtra and he will be charging IGST. Where the goods are supplied on board, including a vessel, aircraft, train, motor vehicle, place shall be the location at which such goods are taken on board. So for example, there is a book vendor is moving across at the platform of railways. I have to board my train from Ahmedabad to Rajasthan. So the bookseller gets in the train from Ahmedabad. The moment I cross the Gujarat border, I enter to Rajasthan. I go and approach him and I purchase a book. So he sells me a book in the train, which has departed from Ahmedabad to Rajasthan and is delivering me this particular books in the train when the train has already entered into Rajasthan. So for such sale of book, I've just taken book as an example. It could be anything. It could be a video game. It could be any other commodity, any artifacts. So here the place of supply will be the location from where the goods are taken on board. So he is actually selling me in the train when I already entered Rajasthan, but he has taken on board at the platform of Ahmedabad. So for him, the place of supply will be Ahmedabad, Gujarat. So this is a summary that I have prepared for easy references. So you can look it when you get a proper appropriate time. For import and export, the place of supply of goods imported into India shall be the location of the importer, but obvious. Exported from India shall be the location outside India. If you buy any commodity or service from buy any goods from Germany to India, so you have to see the location of importer. Importer is in India and the location of supplier is in Germany. So it is an interstate transaction. Exported from India shall be the location outside India. Location of supplier is in India. Where the goods are going to be exported, for example, it is USA. So USA becomes the place of supply and it happens to be interstate supply. So we discuss about place of supply of goods. Now we discuss about place of supply of services. Section 12 very important to consider that section 12 is only addressing where the recipient as well as the provider is in India. If any of these parties are outside India, section 12 is not relevant. General provision says that if it is the services are provided to a person who is registered, the place of that person will be the place of supply. I being in Ahmedabad provide my consultancy services to my client who is registered in Maharashtra, then Maharashtra will be the place of supply because the place where he is registered will be the place of supply. These are the general provisions. Now under that they have given list of specific transactions that if you fall under the specific transaction, you go and find your place of supply accordingly. But if not, then you go and refer general provisions. So for immovable property, architect, interior, real estate agents. So any such services which are provided in connection to immovable property will be the place where the immovable property is located. For example, I am a real estate agent. For example, I am an architect. I have been given an order to construct a property in Rajasthan. I am supposed to construct a hotel in Rajasthan being an architect. So where is the hotel getting constructed? It is in Rajasthan. So for me, the place of supply will be the place where the immovable property is located. For example, I being a chartered accountant stepped down to Maharashtra to provide my consultancy services to my client in Maharashtra, for which I book an hotel. So that hotel being an accommodation, the services provided by the hotel is an accommodation services. So if you see any of the hotel bills, they'll charge you CGST and HGST because the location of supplier is also in Maharashtra, the hotel owner, and the place of supply being immovable property will be also in Maharashtra, which will be intrastate supply and CGST and HGST will be leviable. As far as restaurant, personal grooming, gyms, barber shop, for such services, the location will be the services, the location where the services are actually performed. So these are the services wherein you are supposed to go in personal to that particular place and get yourself served. So if I want to eat something and I have to go to the restaurant. If I want to get myself exercise, I have to go to the gym. If I want to get my haircut, I have to go to the barber. So for such services, this location will be the services where they are actually performed. So every restaurant you will find CGST, SGST. Every saloon you will find CGST, SGST, and for every gym you will find CGST and HGST. Now coming to training service. If it is provided to a person who is registered, it will be the location of this person. If provided to a person who is not registered, it will be the location where the services are actually performed. For example, I have a client in Delhi. I asked him that kindly send your finance team to my location, which is in Ahmedabad. Now my client is registered. Their staffs are coming down to Ahmedabad for getting a training from me in Ahmedabad in any of the hotel of Ahmedabad. So here the location of a place of supply will be the location of Delhi because he's a registered person. So I have to see the place of supply as Delhi. So I'll be this being an interstate supply, I'll charge IGST. But what if my client is not registered and the people are coming down to Ahmedabad for service? So Ahmedabad becomes my place of supply and this becomes an interstate transaction. I have to charge CGST and SGST. Coming to admission to a cultural sporting event. Here the location where the event is actually held. So the recipient either is registered or not registered, that is irrespective of it. The event will be the place of supply. If I go to a Wimbledon lawn tennis match, which is which has been organized in Delhi, though I stay in Ahmedabad, though my company is registered in Ahmedabad, but I go down to Delhi for watching this wonderful Wimbledon lawn tennis match. I'll be charged with CGST and SGST because the place of supply happens to be Delhi. So here the place of supply is Delhi because this is the place where the event is actually held. Organization of cultural, artistic, and sporting events. So these are for the event manager, event companies. They get covered in this particular entry, which says that if you provide it to a registered person, it will be the location of such person. If to any other person, the location where the event is actually held. So there is XYZ Limited company is an event company. They have been approached by some diamond traders or diamond merchant association for organizing an award ceremony at Delhi. Now the Diamond Merchant Association is registered. The event manager from Ahmedabad is also registered, but they are placing this event in Delhi. So the place of supply will be the place where the Diamond Merchant Association is registered. But what if the Diamond Merchant Association is not registered and the award ceremony is happening in Delhi? And in such case, the place of supply will be Delhi. And for the event company, it would be an interstate transaction and they'll charge IGST. Goods transport service, including mail and courier. So very simple. If it is from a registered person, it will be the location of such person. If it is to any another person, it will be the location where the goods are handed over. For example, I want to send my invoice to one of my client located in Rajasthan. I'll give it my courier to, for example, Blue Dart or DTDC. So I being registered, I'll share my GST number to him. So then, though my courier is getting delivered in Rajasthan, but I am being a registered party, they'll charge me accordingly. DTDC registered in Gujarat, the recipient, me being registered in Gujarat, will charge me CGST, SGST being the courier delivering it to Rajasthan. But what if I hand over this particular courier at the place where the courier office is located? I being in Ahmedabad, I drop down to Mumbai and I want to send a parcel to a person who is located in Delhi. I being from Ahmedabad travel to Bombay and I want to courier some commodity to Delhi or I have to send some parcel to person who is situated in Delhi. Then the place of supply will be Maharashtra because I being unregistered, I have I have handed over my goods for transportation in Mumbai. So then the place of supply happens to be in Mumbai. Passenger transport services, if supplied it to registered person, then location of such person. Supplied to any other person, the location from where the passenger embarks on the conveyance. So you may see that when at the time of booking your railway tickets or your bus tickets or your airline tickets, you get an option to feed your GST number. So accordingly, they locate that from where these GST number are there. they decide the place of supply accordingly. But if you are unregistered, then from where the flight is getting, from where the passenger embarks on the conveyance will be the place of supply. Services provided on board or a conveyance including vessel, aircraft, train, and vehicle. The place of supply will be the location of first scheduled point of departure of the conveyance. I travel in Emirates. So during the travel from Gujarat to Dubai, I asked for a service from the airlines that I want to watch a movie, for which they charge me 100 rupees. So the services are provided on board on aircraft. So they will charge me what type of tax? If the airline is registered in Gujarat itself, so for them the place of supply is first scheduled point of departure, which is Ahmedabad. So they'll charge me CNS. But what if the airline people are registered in Delhi and their flight is traveling from Ahmedabad to Dubai? Then the first schedule point happens to be in Ahmedabad. It is located in Delhi. Place of supply is Ahmedabad. So it will be an interstate transaction. They'll charge me IGST. For telecommunications, not that much relevant because there are only some of the telecom operators available in India. It is very much easy to understand if you get yourself any telecommunication installed at your workplace, being a telecommunication line or being a leased circuit internet lines. It will be the place where the equipment is installed. It could be your home, it could be your office. Here, it is not relevant that you are registered or not. For the mobile connections, they have given list of items that if it is a postpaid, the location of billing address. If it is a prepaid, then location from where you have received these prepaid cards. So for banking and other financial services, including stockbroker, location of recipient if the address is available, otherwise location of supplier. I being in Ahmedabad, I have my saving account in State Bank of India and I have given my proper address. So for any of the services that they charge me some amount and they charge me CGST and SGST because SBI is also registered in Gujarat. I am also, and my address is also there on their record, which is also in Ahmedabad and happens to be in same state. So they'll charge me CGST, SGST being an intrastate supply. But what if I travel down to Delhi and I operate an ATM machine in Delhi? So for which they want to charge me something. So in that case also they will charge me CGST, SGST because my address is available on the record of SBI Gujarat. Hope I'm making myself clear. For the insurance services supplied to registered person, the location of such person, because the credits are very much eligible for insurance apart from certain items, and supply, if it is supplied to any other person, location of recipient of services on the record of supplier. I think there is one more section which I have to discuss, but due to paucity of time, I'll just conclude my session. I'll request all the participants to kindly go through this PPT. I'll share it with Igral Bhai. And if you come across any of the doubts, I'm open for discussion and will help you if possible. So I really, I'm really thankful to the branch for giving me a wonderful opportunity to interact with the aspirant chartered accountants, and very grateful to Hiral Bhai for connecting me for this wonderful session. So thank you once again.
Really